Good evening, all. Welcome to this week's Althing Considered, simulcasting into our organization's virtual Winter Moot. For those attending Winter Moot and those of you watching us on StreamYard live, the question and answer session, we're juggling a lot of balls and a lot of different streams here, so we're just going to have a period at the end of this presentation where if you have any questions or want some clarifications, I can go back and talk about any of the subjects we come across at the end of the presentation. So without any further ado, let's get started. This week we are talking about hiding in plain sight, decoding dog whistles and racist symbology. It goes without saying that this discussion is going to include and involve symbols, slogans, dog whistles, outright descriptions of white supremacy, fascism, authoritarianism, both theoretical and historical, racism, anti-Semitism, Christian imperialism, Trump/MAGA, and sexism. Gird your loins, these are not easy subjects, but they are being used, they are being hidden, and they are being overt, and we need to know what, where, and what they mean. So, what is a dog whistle? Merriam-Webster defines the second definition. The first one obviously is actually a whistle that goes to a frequency only dogs can hear, which led to the second definition. Quote, an expression or statement that has a secondary meaning intended to be understood only by a particular group of people. Historically, dog whistle appears to have taken on a political sense in the mid-1990s. The Oxford English Dictionary has a citation from a Canadian newspaper, the Ottawa Citizen, in October of 1995 as the earliest recorded figurative use. Quote, it's an all-purpose dog whistle that those fed up with feminists, minorities, the undeserving poor hear loud and clear. Now, the annoying and fun thing about dog whistling is it's not specifically by itself a negative thing. It simply means, as the definition says, an expression or statement that has a secondary meaning intended to be understood only by a particular group of people. This can be both positive and negative. A primary example would be call-outs to popular video games or pop culture references. If you go to a sci-fi convention and say, so say we all, the Battlestar Galactica fans will all yell that in response. If you go to Dragon Con and yell Loktar Ogar, the Horde players from World of Warcraft will yell back in response. Those are dog whistles. They are statements that has a secondary meaning, I am one of you, intended to be understood by a particular group of people. It is an in-call. The symbols, words, and phrases that we're going to be talking about can be worked and used in the most innocuous of places. And these are not just intended to push the alt-right, fascist, authoritarian narratives further into the popular zeitgeist, but also to kind of, to use their own negative term against them, a virtue signal, I am one of you, I know the secret passwords, the code words that make me one of you. That's what they are. This presentation was actually prompted by this tweet by Robert F. Kennedy Jr. that came out only 6 months ago. There is a horrific dog whistle in this tweet. When I was attending the Parliament of World Religions with many of my fellow Troth leadership, I attended a panel where people spoke about the alt-right and the far-right invading technological spaces and using the algorithm and creating the slippery slopes that radicalize people. And I went up to one of the panelists afterwards and I said, what do you think about Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s latest tweet? And he said, "Oh, I haven't seen it." I said, "Well, here it is." And I showed it to him, and he did not catch the dog whistle at all. So if you caught it, good on you. It's actually going to be the very first one we talk about. But it is, in fact, these first two sentences in this second paragraph. 14 days and 88 days. Those are oddly specific days, don't you think? Also, no, the typical turnaround time for pro forma protection is not 14 days. And he has offered no documentation about 88 days of no response for follow-ups. But 1488 refers to the 14-word slogan, the 14 words coined by the white supremacist David Lane, who served a lot of prison time for murder. The 14 words are: "We must secure the existence of our people and a future for white children." The 88 refers to the number 8, which refers to the 8th letter of the alphabet, which is H. So 88 is HH for Heil Hitler. 1488 is, as you see from the category here on the presentation, one of the most obvious ones. You see 1488, you're dealing with a white supremacist. You're dealing with a neo-Nazi. Anyone who displays this is unquestionably out as a far-right person. You can see here a patch that a fascist group wore with the Nazi Totenkopf skull and crossbones. I mean, they make no ambiguity in their statement if they use 1488. So Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was just kind of throwing that out there. My guess is he was trying to see if he could pull any of the racists away from the Trump MAGA crowd, but who knows? I forgot to mention the categorization that I've done here, the obvious ones, and then I've got two lower levels as we get more kind of blurred or obscured. You will see all of these on various levels, both hidden and overt. And these are all my classifications, my kind of guessing and spitballing about how easy it would be for the layman to notice. Some of these are, as you can see here, 1488, obvious, not heathen symbols, but a lot of times you will see these symbols alongside heathen ones, which is why people think heathens are racist if they don't know about us and about inclusive heathenry. So moving on to the next one. Deus Vault. So you've got a lot, and this is something you see a lot in the alt-right spaces. There's a lot of bleed over between the political far-right ideology and the a very traditional militaristic heavy masculine warrior ethos religious aspect. So on the Christian side, you get the imperialists, the crusaders, who use this term. If you see Deus Vault at the end of a post or at the end of a Facebook comment or X tweet, it's a tweet. Musk can go jump in a river. It's a tweet. But if you see Deus Vault, you're dealing with most likely a far-right Christian individual. Blood and soil. This is another classic Nazi symbol. It sounds relatively innocuous unless you know exactly what it is, but it is unquestionably, obviously Nazi. It's a derivative of the Bluetooth Air, a slogan popularized by the Nazi Party. The phrase really in neo-Nazi context kind of took off when Vanguard America popularized the notion that America's for white people, which is ridiculous, but you know, the racists are going to race. The obvious ones, Stephen McNallen. I'm going to say it He is heathenry's racist grandpa/uncle. Yeah, he was there at the beginning, but he's only gotten more racist as time has gone by, and that's saying something considering where he started. When he finally stepped down from the AFA a few years ago, he just took the gloves off. Make a mental note of the symbol you see on his shirt and next to his Wotan network. We're going to be seeing that one again later. When McNallen stepped out and became unquestionably racist, the platform he chose to make his speeches, produce his videos, do this lovely little slick graphic for him was Red Ice Radio. And you'll see that very popular in some racist and folkish heathen circles. It's a white supremacist media company based in Sweden. Southern Poverty Law Center has described Red Ice Radio as being important in the YouTube alt-right radicalization pipeline, radicalizing people who were tentatively on the far right and, quote, having a history of embracing white supremacist rhetoric and talking points. So it was pretty much the easiest place for McNallen to go when he wanted to come out and start dropping his more racist talking points. Next up, we have what's called the White Genocide or Great Replacement Theory. This is something that sounds awful. I mean, they're using the word genocide, but it really is a conspiracy theory that the moment you hold it up to demographics, to science, to sociological study, it just kind of falls apart. The Great Replacement is a white nationalist conspiracy theory that was espoused by French author Renaud Camus. The original theory states that the elites, through the complacency or the cooperation of the elites, the ethnic French and white European populations at large are being demographically replaced, culturally replaced by non-white peoples. In Europe, the problem is, they all point at Muslim immigrants through mass migration, and the big problems that we saw and we're still seeing with human trafficking across the African North Coast and on the western borders of the European Union. It's, almost copy pasted over here in America with all of the build the wall fears and things of that nature. And the biggest problem with the white genocide and great replacement theory, conspiracy theory, is that it has all kinds of handy dandy little sockets that other conspiracy theories can latch on to. Who are these elites who are complicit with the destruction of the white race? Well, if you're anti-Semitic, it's the Jews, or who the Jews have paid off, or who the Jews control. If you're not anti-Semitic, well, it's the degenerate hedonists, the liberals, the Democrats. You can plug whatever boogeyman you want into this. And so it has become kind of the common glue across both European and American racist organization and groups meeting together and finding ideological common ground even across religious boundaries. You'll see Christian groups agreeing with Norse pagan groups, racist Norse pagan groups, on this premise. And even if, even within the group, they don't all agree on who the elites are, well, the problem is they're trying to replace us. And, as you can see from the photo here, there's a direct line between this original theory of the replacement of the white race, and ethnic Europeans, to the Charlottesville rally, where that chant of "Jews will not replace us" echoed through the courtyards. I mean, it's just kind of unnerving to see how the conspiracy theory has spread and grown throughout the years. And the big one, the classic, the Hakenkreuz, the Nazi symbol that has loomed historically over all of their terrible acts, the genocide, the ethnic cleansing, the symbol that the neo-Nazis still use. There's a lengthy argument and discussion to be had about the swastika, which is not the same symbol. The Nazis originally actually called it a Hakenkreuz. A lot of the press, when the Nazi party was rising to power, called it the Hakenkreuz. And so there's a discussion to be had about whether or not the swastika has a place in modern society within living traditions who still use it. Native American cultures, Buddhist cultures, Jainism, and a few others. But as far as heathenry goes, anything Germanic or Germanic Scandinavian flavored, it's off limits. Anyone trying to reclaim or use the historical version, no, it's not something that we can use. There's too much history there, and it's too heavy. So those are the obvious ones. Those are the ones that if you see it, you're dealing with a racist. You're dealing with a Nazi. Those are, do not pass go, do not collect $200, go straight to alt-right jail. Now we're going to start blurring the lines, slightly more sneaky, as I say. These are things where I'm going to date myself here. If you guys, if anybody remembers the was it midnight? Well, was it late 80s? I don't remember now. The Michael Keaton, Jack Nicholson Batman movie. The subplot that kind of went nowhere that I always thought was interesting and clever was the Joker poisoned cosmetics, and people started randomly having the laughing fits and die with the Joker grin on his face, and everyone was panicking. Everyone was wearing no cosmetics at all. They couldn't figure out what was going on, and Batman figured out that it was, in fact, not one thing that you wore. It wasn't the lipstick. It wasn't the eyeshadow or the foundation. It was, if you did any, like 4 or 5 of these 10 or 12 products in combination, you reached a level of toxicity where you had the laughing fit and died with a smile on your face. All of the symbols and phrases and everything after this point, they have varying levels of potency, but if you see them by themselves, it may not be racist. It may not be alt-right. It may not be fascist. Some more than others, but if you start to see 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, if you start scrolling that feed and you see more and more of them popping up in conjunction with each other, that's when you need to be concerned. So this first one, faith, folk, and family. I mean, it's just kind of a traditionalist viewpoint, right? It's the slogan of the Odinic Right, which is in fact a racist organization formed by fascists in the UK. Something most heathens would probably recognize, but the average interfaith pagan, the guy working, the interfaith minister in the prisons, probably won't recognize that. The average Joe on the street, I mean, that's no different than just being a conservative, except it's not. That is the dog whistling. Those 3 words in that order, there's your dog whistle. You can thank McNallen for this one too. Odin is with us, or Wotan mit uns. It's just a riff on the World War II Nazi German military slogan, God mit uns, or God is with us. I mean, he's doing what most heathen racists do, which is take Christian nationalism and Christian fascism and slap Odin on it, and well, now it's heathen, isn't it? It's lazy and it offends me, but we'll leave that for another discussion. The Black Sun. Honestly, in retrospect, this one should have been in the obvious ones. But again, in doing research for this, I came across at least 2 or 3 articles, web pages. You can't even call them articles anymore. Articles, web pages, blog posts, what have you, whatever you want to call it, that said it was historical, but it's not. The Black Sun, this symbol specifically, the Schwarz Sun or Sonnenrad, is a symbol distinctly, historically, uniquely Nazi. The first occurrence of this symbol, whether it's the closed-in centerpiece or whether it's got a Hakenkreuz in the middle of it or whatever else somebody wants to put in the middle, occurs in the Wewelsburg Castle when it was remodeled by Himmler during the Nazi era. There are historical sun wheels. There are variations that use the Sowilo S rune, but this specific version, this is a Nazi version. And that's part of the problem with anyone who tries to do their own research or tries to find out about these things. The plethora of articles by laypersons, people who aren't heathens, people who aren't familiar with the history of even World War II or previous or comparative religion, or haven't read the delightfully comprehensive Our Troth Volume 1 that points out and talks about all these pre-Christian, pre-Nazi symbols that we have historical archaeological evidence for. There's so many other web pages and articles and blogs and people who can claim authority, who can claim that they know what they're talking about and have the appearance and links to look authoritative and say, oh no, this one's historical, but a lot of Nazis are using it, so be real cautious when you see it. No, this one's Nazi, and that's the problem, because we've got all of these different articles and blogs, and hell, half of them these days are probably AI generated just for clickbait. They're all referencing each other, and no one, on average, is actually digging down and getting to the meat of things. Next up, we have the wolf Sangle. This actually does have historical usage, pre-Nazi era. It's an ancient runic symbol that was used as kind of it's a wolf trap. You didn't want the wolves going after your flock, so it's kind of a little bit of old runic magic. It's appeared in Germany in many places, from guide stones on the sides of the roads to coats of arms for certain towns. Apparently there is a German city called Wolfsangle. But the Nazis took it and used it. It's appeared as part of the divisional insignia of several Waffen SS units, including the notorious 2nd Das Reich Panzer Division. So as a result, the symbol has become quite popular with neo-Nazis, especially in Europe. Do you remember that McNallen picture I told y'all to look at the symbol for? Huh. Interesting choice, old man. No, you can't take it back. You can't have it. It's too tainted. And you're a Nazi. Or at least a racist. Moving on from him and that nonsense, we have the Armin Runes. These are old occultist. These are not historical like the elder, the younger, and the Anglo-Saxon Futharks. These are inspired by the younger Futhark runes, but invented by an Austrian mysticist and Germanic revivalist named Guido von List. Some of you might recognize that name. Some of you've probably heard it. If you do enough looking into the runes, especially if you look into them for divination or any mystical purposes, you've seen the name von List somewhere, if only in the bibliography. List was a well-known figure with the nationalist and Volkisch subcultures in Austria and Germany in the late 1800s. This guy is direct line feed to Nazi ideology. I mean, this guy is like proto-Nazi. Anyone who uses these runes is cribbing from that tainted well. So many of these symbols that we're seeing and things like that, especially with runes and those of us who kind of wandered into heathenry through the internet, there are some folks who wander in with good intentions and get caught in that self-referential ahistorical cloud that I kind of talked about during the Black Sun point, where they never manage to escape the endless Ouroboros of those articles of people just referencing each other and occasionally drawing from these awful source materials. I mean, this is that slippery slope. You're looking for runes to use in divination and mysticism. And oh, here's another set of runes. Use them. But no, you shouldn't be using these. These are not good runes. These are not for using. So this is one of those cases where if you see someone using them, look for the other signs. You may have someone who is still baby heathen, neophyte, and you can kind of pull them out of that self-referential bad cloud and keep them off the slippery slope. Fingers crossed. Next up, we have the Odin rune. So the Odin rune is a modified Othala rune. The Othala rune doesn't have the little wings or the little feet on the end. Historically, that's the wings or the feet are a purely Nazi addition to the rune. Problem is, most lay people don't even know the difference. Shops and shirts and anyone using AI scraping, image generation, trying to cash in on the Viking craze and runes and all the Viking history, where you'll see the Helm of Awe and the Vegvisir slapped on shirts 6 ways from Sunday. Most lay people won't know that this is in fact the purely Nazi version of this rune, if they're lay people and not heathen. So this is, again, one of those where do a double take a look, see if they're trying to signal something. Sometimes they might be. Sometimes it might be one person who saw that they could use it and sneak it in somewhere. And sometimes it might be entirely an ignorant usage, kind of like I said about the Armin Runes, that it's somebody who didn't know what they were doing. But, back in 2021, the Conservative Political Action Committee, or CPAC, hosted a debate. And the stage looked very, very interesting. In a statement to the Jewish media outlet Forward, the company Design Foundry that was hired to set up the stage said, quote, "They had no idea the design resembled any symbol, nor was there any intention to create anything that did." They added that the American Conservative Union had approved the stage design, one among many, which was, quote, "intended to provide the best use of space given the constraints of the ballroom and social distancing requirements." Ian Walters, the communications director for CPAC, told the same outlet that the design firm, quote, "provided several options for us to choose from, and what we ended up with was the most workable of options they submitted." All it would take, and we know there are alt-right and racist folks in the conservative sphere, in every conservative party at various levels. All it would take would be one person on that committee who knew what this was with plausible deniability to go, "Yeah, this one. This is the one we're going to use. This is dog whistling, whether they intended it or not. The people who are trained, the obsessive folks like myself who kind of keep an eye out on these things, we all noticed. We all noticed, which means the racists who use this symbol on the regular, they noticed too. Another one that has a lot of use online is the echo parenthesis. This is an anti-Semitic symbol that's been used to highlight names or organizations or groups that people think are either Jewish or influenced or bought out or owned by the Jews. It was first begun by the neo-Nazi blog The Right Stuff, but it's been adopted by anti-Semites, neo-Nazis, white nationalists, basically all of the dregs of humanity. I mean, it was used even to harass Jewish political journalists during the 2016 Trump campaign, and I fully expect to see more of it in the coming year. Something to be aware of. Odinist. Those of you who have been keeping up with the court drama that our amazing CEO Lauren has been running interference on, it is Odinist. It is not Odinite that those guys were trying to point out. Odinist is a term specifically for racist heathenry. It was created by Elsa Christensen. Elsa Christensen was the founder of the Odinist Fellowship, which was specifically designed to create communication networks both within prisons and between prisons for white supremacist gangs using heathen Norse Germanic religion as a cover. If you want more information, a deeper dive, the Heathen History podcast has at least one, I want to say 2 episodes on Christensen, because she casts a large shadow on the history of heathenry as a whole. So check that out if you want to find out more about what's going on there. Again, though, you encounter someone online or in person at a meetup and they say, I'm an Odinist. Are they racist? Likely, possibly, but maybe not. In my wanderings, in my meeting with people, even especially online, I have met more than one baby heathen neophyte who was dipping their toes in and saw Odinist just as someone who has a close relationship with Odin, like an Odin's man or Odin's woman or Odin's person, whatever term you're comfortable with. And they didn't know the difference. Keep your ears to the ground, your head on a swivel, and look for other warning signs, other dog whistles. Because some of them are people signaling to each other, hey, I'm one of these guys. And sometimes it's an innocent person who doesn't know what they're doing. Folkish. Folkish heathens have been trying to clean up the term folkish for 5 years at least. I mean, you can draw a line directly from the word folkish to the Volkish ideology and gatherings and groups and what have you in Nazi Germany and pre-Nazi Germany. It's if someone self-identifies as folkish, probably racist. They probably have a few other of these dog whistles and warning signs and troublesome ideologies that they're using. The idea, for those of you unfamiliar, those of you tuning in, those of you who are still new to this, the idea behind folkish heathenry is that it draws from the terminology and the word history of the Volkish, but it also pulls from the utter nonsense that is McNallen's essay called Metagenetics, wherein Uncle McRacist posits that there is a specific genetic key or tie or gene or something. There's a hook in your genes that ties you to a specific set of deities, the ones your ancestors worshipped, the ones they were tied to. He never really bothers to talk about how many generations of conversion, how many generations of, say, Christians it would take to unhook that genetic tie. How many different hooks there might be for someone who is multinational, multi-ethnic. He doesn't go into that. It's literally just an excuse to say, I want to worship only with other white people, people of European descent. It's ridiculous. It's nonsense. That's what it means. But just like the faith folk family that we started off this section with, folkish heathenry, your layperson, your average interfaith minister isn't likely going to know what that means. They're not going to know about this collection, this meeting of two horribly racist ideologies that come into a fairly innocuous word. So this is why it kind of is slightly more sneaky. Not much, but slightly. White guilt. This is something that they will throw at anyone they perceive as seeking to decolonize themselves, someone who is actively attempting to push anti-racism as a narrative, as something that needs to be done within culture, within heathenry. McNallen specifically said, quote, I don't need to apologize for being white or for having a special love for my race. I mean, there were cases, well, not cases, but I mean, I follow a few racist pages just to kind of keep an eye on what they're doing. When McNallen said that in his coming out video right after he stepped down from the AFA, there were that was when white guilt really took off and first started gaining traction among far right spaces. And they were sharing memes of ridiculous arguments and people chaining themselves up. And it again, it's just something they're going to throw out. Anyone who tries to use phrases around this, I don't want to be, I'm not going to be made guilty for being white. I'm not going to be made to feel bad for being white. This could just be someone who has not done the homework, who has not actually done any self-reflection on what that actually means and what they're arguing for, and is just regurgitating conservative talking points, which is the point of these dog whistles, which is pushing these ideas, these words, these phrases into the public narrative. I'm going to go a little bit off script here. There's a specific political phrase called the Overton window. For those of you unfamiliar with it, the Overton window refers to a window, a space on the political spectrum, left to right, of discourse that is acceptable in the public space. There's always going to be stuff outside, on the left, the right, the authoritarian, the libertarian, every direction you want on that political spectrum. There's going to be stuff outside of the acceptable space. But the Overton window can move. And a lot of folks have spoken, a lot of political commentators, political analysts have spoken about how the Overton window has shifted to the right. If you go back, if you could go back in time, even to, let's say the mid 80s, when the religious right was really starting to spin up and come into power, the idea of saying something like white guilt, would have been too far out. That would have been too overt. There was still people who in power and who controlled, the news spaces, the political central public discourse. They're like, that's a little too far out. We're not gonna try and say that. But now you can see it on YouTube. You can see it on certain cable news channels. You can see it in a lot of places. So one of the things about these dog whistles, about pushing these narrative, these words, these concepts into the public sphere. Another example of this kind of white guilt thing is that great replacement theory I talked about earlier. That pushing that into the public narrative, that enough people have talked about it, that politicians in America running for national office in Washington, D.C. actually speak as though they believe in the great replacement theory, in white genocide. Not quite overt, not in the we need to do violence against it, but that dog whistle and speak and use those words. The Overton window has shifted. There's no question about it. Now we're getting into the really obscure stuff, the deep cuts, and by no means is any of this list, any of these terms, objects, images, whatever, what have you, none of this is comprehensive and should not be viewed as a end-all be-all. These are the ones that I've plucked out this week while I was desperately trying to slap this together. I apologize, this isn't a little bit more polished, but y'all are bearing with me this far. I appreciate it. So cultural Marxism. I kind of debated about this one. So many right-wing people use it. You've probably heard it again. Politicians seeking national office, local office, they've used this term, cultural Marxists. The cultural Marxists are destroying American culture. They want to destroy the traditional family, blah, blah, blah. It's an obscure reference. What does it even mean? How do you define cultural Marxism? Marxism is an economic theory. The conspiracy theory posits that there is an ongoing and intentional academic and intellectual effort to subvert Western society with a planned culture war that undermines the Christian traditionalist value and seeks to replace it with hedonist, unlawful, Wild West, culturally liberal values that no one would recognize anything what's happened and your grandfather is rolling over in his grave and so on and so forth. So again, if you think back to the Great Replacement theory, there's a lot of similarity here. There's an ongoing and intentional academic and intellectual effort. Who controls the academic and intellectuals spaces of America and Europe? The elites. Once again, who are the elites? Whoever you need your boogeyman to be. There's a lot of crossover between the White Genocide, Great Replacement theory, and cultural Marxism and accusations thereof. But this one you can throw around a little easier because it doesn't use the word genocide. It doesn't use great replacement. It's cultural Marxism. No one really defined that well in the public discourse, but it's like, what was that old Supreme Court case about pornography? I know it when I see it. Do you, though? Metagenetics. I mentioned it earlier about folkish. It's McNallen's theory that there's genetic hooks and your ancestors are tied directly back to specific deities, and those are the deities you need to worship. And so, worship the deities of your people. You don't see metagenetics actually used or tossed around that much outside of heathen spaces. You'll see some folks point to it or link it directly. When I was doing research for my long dead blog where I ripped McNallen a new one for his coming out video, the first link I found was on a neo-Nazi website with a giant Hakenkreuz at the very top of it. So, those are the people using your ideas, maybe start to wonder. So this one, the very first symbol we talked about, the very first Dogwhistle symbol was 1488. Most people who have dealt with racists know about that one. This one, 2316, is relatively geographically located. I didn't even know about this one, and I've been kind of keeping my ear to the ground in terms of anti-racist spaces for nigh on a decade now. And I wasn't aware of this one until, Lord, maybe a month ago, maybe two, when a individual moved into my area who posted using these numbers on his social media, TikTok specifically. The number combination 2316, again, it's two letters, W and P. White power. That's what they are. Sometimes you'll see just 23, and sometimes you'll see them turned around. 1623, PW for Peckerwood, kind of embracing that that awful racist pride in I can't even finish that thought. Start the world. This is another one I wasn't really familiar with until I started digging into this one. Hat tip to Cat Heath for their marvelous document with a lot of these. That was a very fantastic starting point for putting this presentation together. This slogan is associated with the manosphere troll and alt-right douchebag Jack Donovan. I knew of Donovan. I didn't know his phrase. I hadn't looked into him that closely. He is a hypermasculine dude bro. He's very popular in the neo-fascist and alt-right circles. One of the things that comes up a lot in those spaces is traditional gender roles, the man as defender. A lot of times you see in these spaces, in these dog whistles, this you are under attack. They thrive on fear. That's the crux of all of this messaging, of all of the entire premise and power behind the alt-right ideology and current neo-fascism. They feed on the fear, that people fear, the lack of control in the world, what have you. It feeds into the you're not in control, and I'm going to give you a reason why. It's because of the Great Replacement Theory. It's cultural Marxism. I have the answer. I can tell you why you're scared. I can name your boogeyman. Well, there's the alt-right pipeline. There's people falling down into that. And one of the steps at the top of that slippery slope is the hypermasculine, the pumping iron. There's the leftist slogan: "Did you work out today?" Because a neo-Nazi did. It's true. It's true. The traditional gender roles and the hypermasculine is absolutely one of the things that feeds into racist and alt-right ideology. So something else to keep in mind. Subscribe to PewDiePie. You might have heard this one. You might have heard of PewDiePie. You might not have. He was a relatively famous YouTuber. He was one of the first guys to get famous for doing the Let's Play, where someone just watches you play a video game. But several of his videos included blatantly anti-Semitic themes, words, phrases, content. Subscribe to PewDiePie is a phrase that took off after the Christchurch massacre in New Zealand, because the shooter said it on his live stream before he went in and started killing people. I don't know if it's in use that much anymore, but I included it in this presentation because, subscribe to a video game streamer on YouTube. If you didn't know the origin of that phrase, it's a dog whistle. You'd have no idea that they were literally saying, hi, go have some anti-Semitic content. No clue. Dog whistle. That's what this is about. And I'm sure y'all remember the white power OK sign. The meme, the troll that ate itself and became what it pretended to be. The Pinocchio that became the real awful racist boy. In 2017, the OK hand gesture was started as a joke by the 4chan online group. They said, oh, hey, look, this looks like the letters WP for white power. That's what it means. It was literally a troll. They were making it up. It wasn't real. They were like, let's do something that looks completely normal, but actually means this awful thing. That's what 4chan does. They come up with these ridiculous things. But it was a victim of its own success because the hoax was so successful that it started taking off in alt-right spaces. It started taking off with the white supremacists, with the racists. And they started taking pictures, doing the OK sign. And then coming full circle, lending actual credence to everyone who was like, no, this is what this means now. If you see someone doing this, the white supremacists were using it. And the Christchurch shooter did the OK white power sign in a courtroom appearance after his shooting. It's weird. It's weird. But this is the epitome of a dog whistle. It's something that if you didn't know what it was, you would think it was something else. And it could still be that something else. So you have to look, you have to keep your head on a swivel, and you have to look for other signs and context. It's the damnedest thing. I mean, let's face it, these days, anybody who uses the traditional, anybody who throws radical in front of traditional is probably right-wing, alt-right, neo-Nazi, neo-fash. As an actual defined ideology, radical traditionalism, uses Guido von List, the guy who came up with the fake runes, and Julius Evola, someone else who fed ideology into the proto-Nazis when the nationalists were rising to power in the early 1900s Germany. One of the most popular, awful dog whistly groups on Facebook is called Trad West. Traditionalist, Western. Sound relatively innocuous. But yeah, no, they're pretty far right. So you got to look, got to find those other dog whistles, see what they're really trying to say, who they're really trying to talk to. This is an obscure one, but one that I, in various comments and spaces on different blogs and YouTube comment sections, I have actually had this one thrown at me a few times. It was created by the Proud Boys several years ago, and it references the right-wing death squads under Chilean dictator Augusto Pinochet. Pinochet, who famously, awfully, tortured over 27,000 people that were accused of being leftist. Over 2,300 were murdered, and we know of at least 100 people who were thrown out of a helicopter into the ocean, river, lakes, and most of their bodies were never recovered. So if anyone ever, it's like the one I mentioned earlier, Deus Vault. If anybody ever signs off a comment or a rebuttal or something in a space with referencing a helicopter ride, this is what they're talking about. This is I am far right and I am threatening violence. A little unnerving. And this one I'm throwing in because I haven't seen it that much. But that coming out video from Stephen McNallen, you remember the 14 words I talked about at the beginning? I mean, those are internationally famous. I mean, the racists in Europe use 14 words. But McNallen, he quoted it. He quoted the 14 words in his video. And he said he didn't have a problem with the premise of it, but he knew they were tainted. He knew that if you said, I'm going to quote the 14 words, or, these 14 words mean something to me. He wanted to rebrand it. So he came up with this: the existence of my people is not negotiable. I haven't really seen it take off. I haven't seen it used a whole lot in some heathen spaces, but again, it's another dog whistle. It's another attempt to signal to other racists, other right-wing folks, that I'm one of you and I know what I'm talking about and what I'm doing. So this last section is specifically heathen, and it's the stuff they're trying to take. It's the stuff we cannot let them have. It's the Vnut. It's a weird historical symbol. It probably refers to Odin in some way. There's been scholarly debate for decades within and without heathenry about what it actually means and what its use is, what its context is. In the popular zeitgeist, in pop culture, though, Vnut equals Odin. So like it or not, that's what people think. And like every other Odin, Norse, Viking thing, the Fash want it. They want to tap into that traditionalist, hypermasculine warrior ideology, mentality, imagery. That's what they want to use. That's what they want you to think about. And so they use this. They use the Vnut, usually along other side racist symbology like 1488 or other symbols. The image I pulled this from was the banner for an article titled "Why Far-Right Groups Co-opt Norse Symbols." The ones who wrote this article, and this was an actual article for a journalistic group. This wasn't, Bob's blog or something. They thought that when it shows up in your Google feed, in your Facebook preview, in your Twitter preview, it's going to catch your attention. You're going to know what it means. You've seen that symbol. You might have seen it on Vikings. You might have seen it in a video game. You know it means Viking. You know it means probably Odin. The fact that, the QAnon shaman had it tattooed on him certainly hasn't helped things. Then there's the runes. They're trying to take the runes. Othala, the actual Othala rune, not the Oda one with the little wings or the footies, not the Nazi version, the actual rune. The Nazis use this one too. They use this one. It was the divisional insignia of at least 2 Waffen-SS divisions. In 2016, the U.S. Nationalist Socialist Movement, the neo-Nazis, changed their flag from one with the Hakenkreuz to the Othala rune. Now, most of the party uses in pop culture in public spaces, when they deign to show their faces, and in online spaces, most of them have gone back to the Hakenkreuz. But this version, the one with the Othala rune, Charlottesville. There it is. And look down here, bottom right corner of this photo, the Nationalist Alliance. What's that on his shirt? Could it be another rune? Yes, it could. Not this one. We'll get to the other one in a second. I told you I slapped this presentation together. If I was smarter, I would have put them in right order. Anyway, bear with me. So the Tyr rune, the Tiwaz rune, Nazi Germany used it. It's been the warrior's rune on swords, on armor. Historically, it's tapping into that warrior ethos, that masculine ideal, and it was used by the Nazis. The brown shirts, the Waffen-SS infantry. So, of course, the neo-Nazis have used it. It is one of the most common used by the racists and white nationalists who aren't even heathen. So if this is one of those, if you see it in the wild, look for other contexts. They may not even be heathen. They may just be a racist. The Nordic resistance movement is a pan-Nordic neo-Nazi movement in all of the Nordic countries. It's an actual political party in Sweden. It's established in Norway, Denmark, and Iceland. It was in Finland until Finland banned it in 2019. It's still in use. The racists still want it. They can't have it. Here's that rune I was telling you about. Elhaz or Algis. That was the one in the picture from the Charlottesville, the National Alliance. They adopted that as part. This one is part of their logo. The Nazis did use this one too, including as part of the Lebensborn project, which encouraged SS troopers to have children out of wedlock with Aryan mothers and kidnap children who they assumed were Aryan from occupied Europe to raise as Germans. Because of that and the ties to family genetics, traditional family having children, that whole thing, the Nazis used it, and so the neo-Nazis are tapping into that thing too. Here you can see it's in the symbol of Volksfront, also known as Volksfront International, an American white separatist organization founded in October 20th of 1994 in Portland, Oregon. Not heathens, just racists. This one caught me off guard. The Yira rune. Almost no historical Nazi usage that I was able to find. But in the 2010s, the Nazis started picking up on it. In Sweden, for example, the National Youth League, a neo-Nazi group, adopted the Yira rune as its logo. In the US, the rune has started to appear on flyers and cards and various propaganda of the alt-right and white supremacist and white separatist movements. They want this one too. They can't have it. And, lastly, Mjolnir. They want that masculine. They want Thor, that power. I still remember, I think it was it was either Vice or Slate article way back in the day, where someone went to a white supremacist gathering undercover, and as they sat down for the lunch, they sat down next to some young kids, one of them who was wearing a Mjolnir, and this guy actually knew what it was, impressively, and the older fella who sat down across from him looked over at the kid and said, "Oh, you're wearing a Thor's hammer. I know you're one of us. Let me tell you." And the old guy, started feeding off the alt-right neo-fash party line. There's a reason in interfaith spaces that you need to be aware that the layperson, their only experience might, with someone wearing a Mjolnir, might be a racist. Might not even be a heathen, but it might be a racist. I'm not saying you have to hide it. I'm not saying you have to change who you are. I'm not saying you have to be not a Thor's person. I'm telling you that the racists are using it, and we can't let them have it. So we've got a few examples here now that we've gone through all of these. This particular one is a screenshot from the comment section of McNallen's video to explain this one. If you notice right there in the middle of the screen, there's those echo tags I was talking about. Somebody's calling that person a Jew. But Varg Vikernes, if you're not familiar with him, is a tried and true blood and soil neo-Nazi who's already spent over a decade in prison for murder. And I mean, the guy still publishes racist and nationalistic propaganda. You know, notice here that Stephen McNallen is thanking the person who used those echo tags. So, you know, and that he agrees with Varg. So, woof. Here's one. Notice the name of the group. Not all 3 words. It's got the tree. Probably heathen. Blessings to all. Okay, yeah. But then, what about those words at the bottom? Yeah, they're posted in German, trying to be cute. Are they trying to be cute, or are they trying to be kind of dog whistly to neo-Nazi German fanboys? What's those last 2 words on the right category there? Is that blood and soil? Is that family kids? Is that traditional family procreation? And is that a rune, or is that architecture behind that family? Yeah, this thing's full of dog whistle, guys. It's full of it. So yeah, you look long and hard enough, you can spot a lot. And especially in ones like these, where the art, the symbols, the words are chosen and chosen carefully, there's a reason. What about this one? We've got that same rune. We've got a possible dog whistle rune that Nazis have used. We've got this kind of attack, battle, wartime footing here. You know, the quality of life doesn't mean as much as the quantity of it. I'm ready to die for my ideology. Maybe. But here's the thing. This page, I scrolled a good while. Looking on the page that originally posted this one on Facebook. And it's pretty benign. Bit Ásatru, bit of that hyper-masculine, nothing overtly racist, just not even traditional gender roles, really, in that one. It's just a lot of the Victory of Valhalla kind of ideology or viewpoints. Again, it's not that bad. But, you know where I found this image? I didn't find this image on the original post. I found the original post because Folk and Faith, the group I just showed you, reposted this picture. So keep your head on a swivel. Look around. Pay attention. Look for the other dog whistles, the other symbols. Ask why certain words were chosen. Ask why certain numbers. Why 14 days? Why 88 days? Senator Robert Kennedy Jr. Why those when other days, numbers, symbols, words could have been chosen? And that's all I have for you. So, whew.
I have returned. Thank you, Carl. Thank you so much. That was a lot. So
back.
As Lauren collects all those tasty cues for these 8, oh wow, that was a terrible way to phrase that. Just give the algorithm even more to just bury us in the bowels.
Look, if I
We're
wasn't
ruining
already
everyone's algorithm tonight is what's going on. That's what's happening.
if I
But
wasn't already on a government watch list, my Google search history for the last week certainly has put me on a few.
but thank you, Carl, for wading through that with us. It's still an important topic. I know that there are other resources for these kinds of things, but it's always good to see also an updated version with some of these new memes that are coming out, things like that. That's really important to know. I did have some cues for you,
Certainly.
if I can throw it at you. So, Carl, I had the privilege of being there with you at the Parliament of World Religions. You had come up to me after there was a specific thing that I recall. You had come up to me after, I don't know if it was a panel, but it was on that last day. Do you remember you came up and someone had said something to you? Someone had said something like kind of sinister sounding. Like he might have said, I don't remember. It seemed like he was like a tradcath or something.
Oh, yeah.
You recall, and this was at Parliament.
Yes.
Some guy, you said he was like pretty clean cut dude, walked up to you and like said something. Can you recall what he said?
Well, it wasn't me. So I was on a panel, and I happened to sit next to a UU minister who I found out through the Q&A of that panel lives in a metro that's about 2-3 hours from where I am. And we got to talking because in that metro, there are quite a few AFA and racist heathen groups that we kind of have to keep an eye on and keep an eye out for. And that person told me that after a panel that they had attended, they had a person come up to them and say, can I have a picture with you? And they were like, sure. Because this person is a fairly outspoken and popular on public, on social media. They assumed it was somebody who knew him from there. And they did. But as soon as the picture was taken, the guy said, oh, yeah, I'm Tradcath, and then walked away.
For those who don't know, Tradcath stands for is a nouveau slang term for traditional Catholic.
If you think back to the radical traditionalists that I talked about earlier, the Catholic version of that.
Yes, very, very into Evola, very anti-Vatican II, wants the Mass in Latin. Like, there's all these. So there's like a whole bunch of dog whistles for heathenry that Carl's went through, but then there's like a whole other set of dog whistles for Christian nationalism, which is another topic that I wanted to ask you about as well. Right as we get into a question here from our lovely listeners, from Lauren, our president and CEO. How do we keep these symbols they want to claim from being taken?
Exactly what the Troth is doing. Getting out in the public spaces, in the interfaith spaces, in the prison ministries, and speaking to those who run these events, pride parades, community building organizations, community service, anywhere that can raise our visibility and show that the only for some people, the only example they have is the racist. And with popular media being the way it is, if it bleeds, it leads. So the racists are going to get top billing, and it's a long, hard road to getting our symbols into the public space in a good context. And I think the Troth as an organization, personally, has done quite a bit in that in the last 2 to 3, 4 years, especially. And especially with the Parliament of World Religions. We've talked about it before, and I know you and I have talked about it every chance we get, that so many folks came up to us and it's like, okay, and we kind of fill them in that no, there's good guys out there. In the panel, in one of the panels I attended, I spoke with the regional Midwestern head of the ADL tech division. And I said, have you heard of Stephen McNallen? And I just watched the man deflate. He knew exactly who I was talking about. And I said, well, we're the Troth. And he looked at me quizzically. And I'm like, we're the other guys. We're the good guys. Come on.
Yeah.
We have to raise our visibility.
Yes. And also I would say that, you had mentioned before, and I'm actually glad you did, about our ability to create dog whistles are not always bad. They're just things that have double meanings. So, for example, we can create our own symbols, right? We can make our own things that mean things to us. And we can also, I'll give away some of the game here. The Troth's logo is a dog whistle because of the font that we chose. It's actually in the font. You were part of these discussions. When we chose the font, it was very intentional that we picked Futura as the font, because it was the font invented by a guy who opposed the Nazis. And that was why I zeroed in on that one. I'm like, oh, these guys want to use this very typical Nazi font, right? I think it's like it's like Antiqua something. Can't remember. So I'm like, I wonder if anyone who is against the Nazis made a font. And it turns out that there was a guy who opposed the Nazis, was actually had to flee Germany because they were trying to kill him, who invented Futura. So I thought that was a badass story. So I'm like, yeah, you can write those stories into what you do. You can make your own dog whistles. You absolutely can. And you can make it fun to spread. And that was a fun little thing. I also wanted to show this. Lauren says there is a weird heathen to Tradcath pipeline. And Eastern Orthodox too.
And the atheists, the hard atheists, interestingly, tend to fall back into Tradcath.
Yeah.
If they fall back into any religion at all.
Yeah. Oh, and before I show this one, I just want to, we have to refuse to let the right be the only ones wearing, speaking on, or presenting, being openly ourselves wherever we can. Yes.
Absolutely.
In public spaces. It's very important that we do that work. I would say, through interfaith work, through public outreach. It's so important to do. Now we get to Lisa. Lisa's been very patient. Lisa M. How can you manage, Carl, to read all these horrible things that people write? How does it affect you to read it, even if it's just for research?
I've always been morbidly curious. I've always wanted to know. I'm medically diagnosed ADHD. I've always had a mind for taking things apart, putting things back together. I'm a software engineer by trade. And the idea of why does this happen? How has this come about? What led to this isn't just for code or buildings or cars. It's for people. We talk about the alt-right pipeline. How did this person end up sig heiling in a courtyard in Charlottesville when 5 years ago they were just a lonely kid on the internet? It's the pieces, it's the breadcrumbs, it's the trail, and I want to know how that happens. It's just a morbid curiosity. It does affect me a little bit. Mostly it just angers me that this happens, that these symbols are corrupted, that these voices are out there spreading hate and disinformation and hurting people. And so if any of you have ever seen, it's kind of an obscure movie starring Aaron Eckhart called Thank You for Smoking. Eckhart plays a lobbyist, a PR man for the tobacco industry. And there's the scene, like core memory, the first time I watched it. He's eating ice cream with his son, and his son says, why do you even do what you do? You're not going to convince the people on TV who are interviewing you to smoke cigarettes. They're already against you. And he says to his kid, he says, do you like Rocky Road ice cream? And the kid says, no, I just like chocolate. And then Eckhart goes on and on about all the cool, fun flavors and the history of Rocky Road ice cream. And then he says to his kid, do you want Rocky Road ice cream now? And the kid says, no, I still want my chocolate. And he says, well, I'm not trying to convince you. I'm trying to convince everybody else. Everyone else who's listening to me right now. And in these kind of presentations, being able to go to Parliament and speak to the people who don't know, and being able to lay out these steps to point out the pipeline of how, the alt-right has affected heathenry, to be able to point and say, well, this is why you have encountered alt-right and neo-fash heathens. And now, because I can tell you this domino order, I can also tell you about our domino order and why it's better. It just gives me a better argument to work with.
Thank you, Carl. Thank you. Did we have any more cues? Because I do actually have another cue to kick off Carl. If he has just a few more moments to
whack
spare.
the beehive a little bit more.
I'm gonna hit that beehive one more time with a big old cue.
I don't see any more in the chat.
Yeah, I don't either. So I wanted to ask you about. So as you were talking about before, it's with the stage setting of the. Well, I don't know. Was it the conservative? Was it CPAC?
Yeah, CPAC 2021.
Yeah, and with the general mainstreaming of these kinds of beliefs, like it's not. I think you and I had that conversation, and we were also talking with Andy, the Reverend Andy from the Lutheran Church Heathen, does that series with, about the rise of Christian nationalism and how these talking points that used to be ones that we'd have to kind of sniff out and go, wait a minute, that's not right, they've now entered mainstream Christianity in the United States, and it's become a political force in and of itself.
That Overton window.
It's that Overton window. How do you think and I will ask you this. So in your looking at these different kinds of pages, these different kinds of movements, how do you think the rise of Christian nationalism, the mainstreaming of these talking points is affecting the folkish heathen movement?
It's I've thought about this a lot because I see it a lot.
Yeah,
in my going around.
Do you think it's
thank you for the underhanded softball here.
Yeah,
it's quite simple. It's a very logical. I was talking about the dominoes, being able to point out where it goes. There's a very, very easy, simple, logical domino progression to follow here. You have folks who get into white nationalism. You have folks who get into this traditional Western isolationist, conservative, locked down white ideology. But you still, as I've pointed out a couple times, you still have that hypermasculine. You have that warrior ethos that I am the manly man who will, plow the field or the misses or, go off to battle. It's like, that's what they want. That's the idea, the symbol, the paragon of what they want to be and achieve and chase. Doesn't really fit with the meek shall inherit the earth, but Vikings. Ooh, it's a lot easier to pull out a warrior ethos when you have Valhalla. It's the reason you see in a lot of these racist heathen spaces, a lot of these Ásatru spaces, that really it's just Christianity with a light coat of Norse pictures slapped on top. I mean, you see the argument a lot. The Valhalla is not heaven and Helheim is not hell, but that's all they talk about. Odin is not God or Jesus, but they a lot of these Ásatru's and these alt-right heathens who come in from the Christian nationalist pipeline, they just treat Odin a lot more like the vengeful, angry, murderous Old Testament style god that some of the Christian nationalists like to use, which is why they don't usually talk about Jesus that much. That Jesus is your get out of jail free card, and God is the one telling you to go make white people. So yeah, that's why I think we're seeing a rise in the heathen nationalist and heathen neo-fash groups kind of in parallel. I mean, the numbers aren't identical, but I think there's a lot of crossbleed going on. And as, you know, in terms of raw numbers, we get more Christian nationalists, we're going to see more heathen nationalists.
I want to get to these questions real quick, but I did have one response to that. I have actually seen the opposite happening. So what I've seen is
really
heathen groups are bleeding numbers into the Christian nationalist movement because of the draw of normalcy, the draw of like okay, these guys want what I want, but I also get to be more normal. So why wouldn't I just do that? And it's something that in the spaces that I've listened to, they are really concerned about. They're like, well, we need to figure out how to fight this, how to bring people back to their, real religion. It's like, dude, this is, it's frightening because it's a repeat. Like what happened to the folkish movement in the 30s? It went to, it went into the general Christian movement. That's generally what happened. Hold on, I got a question here from...
Quick follow-up to your point.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Lauren. All
right.
To your point, they're right to. I couldn't find it. I might be able to find it when I polish this up a little bit and do it again for actual in-person Trothmoot in about 6 months. In the comment section on one of McNallen's old videos, that got shared into another blog, into a neo-fash Christian nationalist blog. In the comment section of that, there were multiple comments of, oh, they believe kind of like we do. They'll be fine until we get rid of all of the racial slurs, and then they're gone too. Them being the pagans.
Yep.
So the desire to get that back to the normalcy, to fit in, it's real.
And so, do you have any tips for other places where people can learn about these dog whistles that weren't covered today? I mean, hopefully safe, nourishing
safely,
them,
and that's the real kicker.
The website.
So many of the things that came up when I was pulling resources and images and whatnot. I mean, I found 7 runic tattoos not to get from 10 Nordic symbols that are secretly racist. And it's like, oh, these are so awful and unresearched. And that part of that cloud that just kind of feeds on itself. It's tough for other. Okay. So if you're looking for dog whistles, for racist symbols that might be hiding in plain sight, the 2 best resources, and I say this with a caveat, so I'm going to follow it with a caveat, are the Anti-Defamation League and the Southern Poverty Law Center. They both have libraries of symbols with descriptors and examples. The caveat I have is it took a lot of work, and some of it I can specifically point to Rob Schreier, our former steer, for getting it. It took some work for, I think it was, I can't remember, I think it was the ADL, to actually put in their entries on racist runes to say modern non-racists use the runes, be aware of context if you encounter it. It may not be just racist. So my caveat is those are good resources for dog whistles. But like everything else that I've talked about today, some of it may be obviously Nazi and fashion, alt-right and all that. And some of it may be an innocent usage. You've got to look for other symbols. You've got to look for context. But those are good starting points that I do trust to an extent.
All right. Thank you. And one from Snow. What's your take on finding the balance between promoting awareness and platforming?
It's a tough line to walk because on the one hand, I really, really want the default searches for runes to be inclusive and non-racist mysticism. I want the Vnut to point to archaeological articles and, you know, maybe something that the Troth has, and not the QAnon shaman and the ADL entries. But, you know, taking the stage, I assume, I'm trying to understand and not answer with platforming. I understand that we don't want to like just take the stage and say, but my symbols. We have to be careful. We have to work together, and we have to decide judiciously what symbols we want and can fight for, like the Elder Futhark runes. Yeah, I mean, the Nazis straight up used the Othala rune, but it is historical, and it's something that, you know, I think as heathens we need to be aware of, and we need to be judicious in using it. But, you know, like I said, the Hakenkreuz isn't something we can do. Some symbols we have to concede the fight so that we can fight for the Mjolnir. That's really the biggest one. And you know, and then the runes and the Valknut, and once those fights are done, once we've gained the high ground, so to speak, for those, then we can start looking at some of the more obscure and shouting the Nazis down about some of the other symbols. It's a tough call. It's not easy to make.
Yeah, I'd also say that we do not need to. People do not have a right to your platform. We do not need to give them the right to speak for themselves here. So if somebody is, I keep thinking back to, this is going to date me, like the Jerry Springer show. We don't necessarily need to be the Jerry Springer and bring on, you know, the quote unquote freak show and say, look at this, how can you be so hateful? And then let them say something and spew whatever they want to say.
Exactly.
They know that what's going to happen is, even if they're brought on a hostile platform, if they get the ability to speak for themselves, they will simply take it to Dogwhistle, throw things out there. And we don't necessarily need to do that, because we have all the things they think. There's nothing they say that they haven't already said.
Yeah, it's exactly like the movie I was talking about.
New that's going to come out. It's going to be some kind of revelation about it, right? It's disgusting, and it's like the only thing we can do is be further disgusted.
Right. It's like the thank you for smoking. You know, we are not going to give any hateful place the ability to speak to all those other people about Rocky Road ice cream. We like our chocolate, thank you very much, and that's what we will continue to talk about.
Look, you've already said you like Rocky Road. We get it. You say it every time you have a chance to say it. I don't need you to say it on my platform. If I need to point to it and argue with it, I will. But I don't need to bring you on just to be fair to you and let you speak for yourself. Because all I know is you're just going to tell us that you like Rocky Road. Yay!
Yeah.
Thank you. Everybody, look at how fair-minded we are, right?
Yep.
Like, no, you don't. We don't need that. I don't see any other remarks in the chat. Carl, if you have any final remarks.
Well, I do want to point out Lauren has a gentle correction for me. The SPLC addendums was Lauren's work. So I think Rob did the ADL and Lauren did the SPLC. So we've got awesome tag team former CEOs and current CEOs in our corner. To end it all up, everybody who stuck through this slapdash presentation and me rambling on for 90 plus minutes, thank you. And we're gonna win. We're gonna have these symbols. We are going to have our faith. We are going to have inclusive heathenry as the default, as the one that people know. It's a long, hard road, but we are on it, and we are walking together. So Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. And now, what was the epic intro is going to be the epic outro. Join us next week for more All Thing Considered.